Welcome to the Land Your Bet Sports Betting Show. Late night on Friday here, getting ahead of the 3 games that we have in the NBA on Saturday. Going to be running through my projections for all 3 of these, and then got that live stream going on tomorrow at Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern on the East Coast tomorrow, so it's going to be morning time out on the West Coast for everybody. Games don't start until 5 p.m. tomorrow in the NBA, so we should be good there, but bring your bets, jump in the comments, and we'll talk about what we got for some Playa Props mostly. I'm going to be looking here at a couple things I'm looking at for these 3 different games on the sides and totals, and some projections and key numbers I think we all need to know tomorrow as we make our bets here on these 3 games. Quick reminder to subscribe to that page and jump in if you have not yet. Like I said, that live stream is a good time. We have a lot of really smart people in there, honestly, that are helping me out too. So having a good time with that. Looking at Saturday, the Celtics here, and they're taking on the Pellies in New Orleans, and Jose Grand Theft Alvarado, Brandon Ingram going to be out for the Pels, and everybody should be available for this Celtics squad unless we get some late ads. But as far as we have right now, everything's all good for that Celtics team health-wise. If you look at the last 5 games for both these squads, Celtics have just been an offensive juggernaut and a defensive, whatever the opposite of that is, because they are 24th in defensive rating over their last 5 games with a pretty cupcake schedule, depending on whatever you think of the Atlanta Hawks, who just beat them twice, right, by a point in this last one. Their pace is really slow, but their offensive rating's high, so they're still scoring over 120 points per game in this time frame, shooting really well, and giving up a ton of shots, man. Now, the Hawks shot pretty well against them, but not that well, just 49.5% from the field overall for that Hawks team in this last game. If you look at the Pels here, the offensive rating for them, really everything's middle of the pack, honestly. The defense has dropped a bit over their last 5 games as a couple other teams have scored points on them, but they're still playing at a pretty fast pace and scoring a decent amount of points, even without BI not in there. They had a low-scoring game in their recent win, but yeah, either way, for this Pelicans team, like, everything's just middle of the road without Brandon Ingram now. They're really not going to be able to go very far in the playoffs without him. They've looked fine on offense, or I should say mostly on defense, other than the last couple games, which really kind of distorted their defensive rating. But let's take a look more closely at this Boston offense. Free throws, not really coming for them over the season. That's not really where they're scoring from. They are getting to the rim a decent amount, but we all know it's about the threes for them. The highest percentage of their points coming from 3, and they are getting out in transition a bunch more than people might realize. 10th most that they're getting out and running and not getting into that half-court offense. For the Pelicans, they are pretty good at limiting free throws, also just really good against the 3. So that is something that you really eye here, is the way that they have the best opponent field goal percentage above the break from deep. That's what you kind of key in on for them, because if you can stop the Celtics from making those threes and force them to become more of a go-to-the-basket kind of team, it's a little bit more out of their comfort zone for most of these guys, other than obviously the Jays for the most part. But I think if the Pellies can handle things down low after getting out on those threes, they should be in a good position to stop these Celtics. If you look at the offense for the Pels, the Celtics have been really good limiting a lot of what the Pellies are going to want to do. They get to the free throw line. They like to get to the rim. And they try to cause turnovers and wreak havoc, right? They don't really love to necessarily have to get into their set offense too often. They are good, prefer to be out in the open court, right, and getting those points that way. That's why you see their points off of turnovers are very high. Their second chance points are very high. It's a lot more of like banger down low ball and really kind of get it a little bit more messy, right? Like guys like Herb Jones and Zion Williamson, that's how they want to play, is a little bit more messy and get things out so that they can use their athleticism to get to the rim, hopefully get to the free throw line. And the Celtics are going to be able to match them on that side in terms of limiting what they want to do at the rim, limiting the turnovers that they create, which would give the Pellies the opportunity to go out into the transition off of those turnovers, get into the fast break. Not something that they should be able to do if Boston's playing the way that they have been, which is taking care of the ball and making their shots. Either way, I would say some of the key stats you need to look at here is based on the last 3 meetings. In the last 3 meetings, Boston won all 3, and they really dominated these 3 areas where they had way more they dominated 2 of these 3 areas. So they had way more threes made. They had way more free throws that they made as well and took. And as far as the points in the paint go, that's where the Pelicans have the advantage. And we'll see if they use that tomorrow, because that's probably what I would do if I was looking to beat the Celtics team, is I would bang down low as much as possible, get this game really messy, like I said, and that's how they're going to be able to win it if they are able to cover this 5.5 points. Personally, I would say that they can cover the 5.5, and that's my lean, at least for this one. Haven't placed a bet, but we'll see about that tomorrow. All right, next game up is not a beautiful matchup of basketball with the Memphis Grizzlies in Orlando, who had a tough loss to the Clippers there on Friday night. They're on a no rest now. now, right? Back-to-back situation for them. If we look actually starting with the injury report here, obviously everybody out for the Grizz. We don't know yet for the Magic as they haven't submitted one after that game against the Clippers on Friday, but we know Santi Aldama is out, and we know that all these rest of these guys are out. So it's going to basically be Triple J, maybe some Luke Kennard will likely be out there, but most of the dudes that you've seen out for the most of this season are still out in this one for the Grizzlies. I want to look at the last 5 and also a little bit closer lens of the last 5 for this Grizz squad. If you look at their offensive rating, defense, it's all bad. It's a bunch of G-leaguers going out there. They're bottom 5 in pretty much every single category you can see right there that might matter. The Magic have been a little bit more average over their last 5 after a couple losses in a row to those West Coast squads, to the Dubs a couple nights ago, and now to the Clippers on Friday night. So they're really around back to sort of just being a middle of the pack offensive team, playing pretty slowly, and then a really good defensive team that limits what you want to do, because if you they're guarding the 3-point line really well, and we know that they have a collapsing defense that always guards really well down low. So where do we turn for answers for this game? Let's start with the last 8 for the Grizz, because this is a pretty good sample size of what's been going on with them. They've been going over, and like we said a second ago, if you looked at that pace for them, 6th fastest pace. That's really what I hone in on for this Grizzlies squad, is like when Desmond Bane has been out there, they've been going much faster, and that's really bumped up that pace. But he is out now in this one, as well as pretty much everybody. So it's back to that sort of choppy style of Jaren Jackson Jr. just pulling as many shots as he wants kind of game, with some Luke Kennard mixed in there. And I think we can probably find some decent look at some props, but I don't know if this 6-2 to the over as of late is something that we can really bank on, right? Because like I said, we've had Desmond Bane around for a lot of these games where the Grizzlies are scoring 112 against against OKC. They scored 116 against the Warriors, and then a bunch of duds, but 124 the other night against the Lakers most recently. And yeah, Desmond Bane was in that game. So that's why I think this is a little bit skewed here. It's even 4-4 against the spread is skewed. Like I can't justify a bet on this Grizzlies squad at all. And I can't really justify a bet on the over anymore at this point, which I would have loved to have taken just based on these raw numbers. You know, even their points per game at 109 is something that's like pretty high for what they were doing before Desmond Bane came back from injury. And if you look at the opponent's points per game, they were limiting teams to a decent degree. Now they just have like one of the worst defensive ratings in addition to one of the worst offensive ratings. And I think the awful like defensive rating is a little bit, it's accurate. The offensive rating is just going to keep going down now because you don't even have Desmond Bane in there to help out get these points. So I can't really justify an over, and I certainly can't justify the Grizzlies to cover, although that's the way that I would lean, because I don't really trust this Magic team in this situation either, as the home favorite right now with an 11.5, probably 12.5 point spread by the time people are seeing, 13.5, but that might drop down rather to 12.5. It opened at 11 and people already hit it up. With everybody out for Memphis, it makes sense. You haven't heard of anybody, so you're not going to feel comfortable betting on Memphis at all. But really with the Magic team right here, in these two situations, it's pretty uncomfortable to bet on them as well. No rest this season, 7-6 against the spread. They're losing by an average of 7.2 points per game. So they've gotten blown out when they've lost, and they haven't really blown too many teams out in this situation. Against the over, in terms of how often they are going over in these games, 8 out of 13, plus 1.9 against the total. So a little bit of something there that might say it's not a super strong trend at 8-5, but it's enough to say like, okay, they tend to go over when they're on no rest. If you look at them after a loss, like this last 2 that they've had now, they are against the spread covering at a decent rate, 18-12, with a margin of victory that is still not very, very impressive. But against the over, they're only 12-18, right? So they are not going over very often. They're going under 18 out of 30 times, and they're actually averaging 5.7 points under the total after a loss. So some conflicting information with the trends there. I don't really like the situation of betting on them either way, as they seem to let up a bit on defense in both of these scenarios. All right, third and final game we're looking at here, story of the night with the Bucks and the Hawks here, with the Bucks the -4.5 favorites on the road against Atlanta, coming off 2 straight victories against the Boston Celtics. Dame Lillard is out, though. He's not going to play in this one. He had to leave that game and came back in their last loss that they just had to the Pelicans. And Giannis is going to play. Chris Middleton's going to play. Pat Bev is going to play. Dame is out, like I said. Jalen Johnson is questionable. That's a huge one for them. He's definitely one of their only quality low post presences at all, or at least dudes around the rim who can get boards and attack the rim on offense. Okongwu out, and we know Trey and Sadiq Bey still out as well for the Hawks here. If we take a look at the last 5 for these two teams, it's really been just like offense for Atlanta. You can see fourth best offensive rating there, not playing defense still, not playing at a very fast pace, which I thought was pretty interesting as well, but really good rebound percentage, especially because they're getting the offensive boards a ton. We'll talk about that in a sec. And defense not good, offense very good when it comes to shooting and limiting the other team's shooting. For the Bucks, defensive rating is actually up to 8th. They have been more of this slow-paced Doc Rivers style team and kind of like really leaning into that as of late, despite that double overtime game versus the Lakers that they blew, which is the only reason that one went over. It was about to be about like a 210-point game before that went to double OT, right? As far as their effective field goal percentage on offense, it's been pretty good, but their defensive effective field goal percentage is what's really impressive here. Tops in the league over the last 5 games, playing some decent teams at this point as well over those last 5. So let's look at what this Bucks team has looked like without Dame Lillard this season. Without him, not really good there. As you can see, 0-5 on the season without Dame, 46-22 with him. The offensive rating drops about 8 points without Dame. And really interesting, 8 points per 100 possessions, I should be specific. And the defensive rating, interestingly, jumps up to 10 points per 100 possessions without Dame. Like, they're giving up a ton more points and scoring a ton fewer. And I cannot imagine that Dame is that important to the defense. So there is something to the idea that they've played some pretty good offensive teams and some fast-paced teams in that time frame, but they're not keeping up. And like I said, 0-5 is pretty unimpressive. They're actually playing faster with Dame at the 99.9 pace versus the 97.5. That's a big deal. That's a good amount of possessions per game that you're losing without Dame and playing a lot fewer. So they are tending to go a bit more to the under when they play without Dame Lillard this season. And if we look at this Hawks team, it's really interesting because over the last 10 games, they're a pretty good squad right now. I mean, at least they've looked like a pretty good squad. They've won a ton of games lately. And it's all because of the way that they're playing offense, very specifically going to the rim, getting offensive rebounds and second chance points, or causing turnovers and wreaking havoc to get fast break points, or making a ton of threes. They're doing all 3 of those things, or at least 2 of 3 of those things, 2 of 3 of them in each game that they're playing. And this Bucks team is pretty bad and vulnerable, exactly where the Hawks want to score from, right? Their offensive rebound percentage is 5th best over the last 10. The second chance points are tops in the league as a result of that. And those points off turnovers, 4th best there, turning those into a lot of fast break points, 10th most there. And then you look at the 3-point stuff, they're taking the 5th highest percentage of their shots from deep, and they're scoring the 2nd highest percentage of their points from deep. Only second to obviously that Celtics team that they just played. Might be a little bit skewed based on the fact that they had to like sort of match what the Celtics wanted to do, which was score a ton from deep, and they wanted to match that, and they did. But that's only been 2 of those games. They've been scoring against other teams as well. And the Bucks, as we know, they're only vulnerable from deep, right? They're very good guarding everything around the rim and everything around even the free throw line a bit, but they're not good at all right now against the 3. Most threes are, 6th most 3-point attempts that they're even allowing, and the 7th most makes as a result. They're also giving up fast break points, which is a problem that Doc Rivers was supposed to come in and fix, that they weren't going to give up those fast break points anymore, and they're still in a bottom 8, let's say, of the league in terms of giving those up over the last 10 games. So they're trying to play a bit slower. They're trying to get things more under control. I'm just not sure how much success they're having doing it. And that is all the time that I have for you guys in this one. Definitely want to remind you one more time to jump in that live stream tomorrow, 2:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. That's what time we're going, usually to get ahead of these games. We've got some late starts in the NBA tomorrow, normally compared to what we usually get, but we'll take it. We'll have a good morning and chill out before we see that. But at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, get in there, bring your bets, and let's get it. And until I talk to you then, happy betting.